Hello and welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, the Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops, a former D1 hooper and current teacher, husband, and father of 3 amazing kids.
And I'm Omari for the second Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press.
And of course, we're always blessed to be joined by our producer, Wes Davenport. And if you are not listening to Wes and Blake Silverman over on the Pin Down on the Detroit Bad Boys YouTube channel or podcast feed, you absolutely should be. They got you guys covered over there as well. But today, Omari, this is our last episode without actual basketball to talk about since Summer League. We have gone 2-3 months since Summer League, just talking offseason moves and getting creative with our episodes. There will be a preseason game next Sunday before we record, whether it's Sunday or Monday or Tuesday, whenever it is. But finally, we will get some real basketball. But before we get to that, how about the Detroit Tigers, man? I jumped in the room. You and Wes were already talking about baseball.
Yeah, it's funny. So neither I or Wes are huge baseball fans. We just confirmed during our pre-pod chat. But we both agree that the gap between regular season baseball and playoff baseball is the biggest gap of all the sports. Like, I could not sit through a baseball game when it's on TV. It's too slow. It's too boring. It's better as background noise. But playoff baseball, where you could just really feel the impact of every single thing that happens on the field, like everything feels consequential, it just becomes a different game. So shout out to the Tigers. I literally had not watched the game until they clinched last Friday. And now I'm all the way in. I'm locked in as a Detroiter. I'm excited to watch this raw. Yeah, we're here. Baseball representing on the pod. We've never talked baseball here before.
And I will not, and it has nothing to do with the Tigers or anything. I don't think I could name a single player on the team. The pitcher was all over my timeline today.
Yeah.
I will not try to say his name because I'll mess it up and people will make fun of me, but it sounds like he was really, really good. I'm excited for the city. I'm excited for the Tigers, but I mean, I am so far removed from being a baseball fan. It's ridiculous.
I feel you. I played baseball a little bit when I was younger. It just never captured my interest from like an actual TV sport. But like, yeah, I mean, it's just a crazy run. I mean, the Tigers had a 0.2% chance a month ago or like 6 weeks ago. And like,
okay, so they made like a crazy run here to end the season.
Yeah, I think it was like the greatest run of all time, like to close the year out and like sneak into the playoffs. Like it was like some 30 for 30 stuff for sure.
Okay, I did not realize that. So, all right, Tigers baseball, Lions with a really, I did not see the game. We had a JV football game Monday, but I saw some of the highlights of Jamison Williams just running by everybody, David Montgomery running over everybody before running by them. And apparently Jared Goff just never has an incompletion. So Lions football playing pretty well as also.
It was a good game. It was a fun game. Big play after big play. Like, just me being a Michigan State Spartan, I always loved watching Kenneth Walker III. So watching him go off, and obviously the Lions still win, is like the best of both worlds. But it was a great game, man. Like, this team keeps catching me off guard with just the way that they keep finding ways to win. Like, this is like 30 years of just disappointment hard-coded into me as a human being. Like, I'm still nervous. I don't know what to expect from this team. I don't know. We're in uncharted waters.
So Detroit for Life 1000 says Detroit basketball. Our guy Harry says, what up, doe? We had another one here. YouTube user Omari, the senior beat writer now. And Vin is, what up, doe? How are we feeling about our bad boys? Is our new coach any good? So we'll talk about all of media day as we get into this episode. We're going to talk reactions, quotes, all of that. And then we've already starred some of your guys' questions in comments in the chat. So if you're on Twitter right now, if you're on YouTube, if you're on Facebook, drop those questions, comments, analysis in the chat. We'll get to those at the end of the episode. And if you're watching live or after the fact, make sure you give us a like, a star, a follow, a subscribe, whatever it is, and give us a shout out and a rating. Mark, what's up, my guy? So, Omari, no direct quotes yet. Okay, we're going to get to the direct quotes. Overarching thought or takeaway from Pistons Media Day for you?
There's so much new that there's just like 18 different like plot threads in my head. But if I'm tying them all together, it's that it's like step one for the team, right? Like, Trajan doesn't want to set expectations, like, obviously, because it's his first season and he's still getting to know this roster. But like, with that, you had players talking about what we learned from last season. We can't repeat that, this and that. So it almost feels like a 1.5 hybrid. Like, they kind of feel like a 1.5 hybrid day of a rebuild, where you're kind of walking these two lines of, we're not going to set expectations, but we're never going to do last season again because I was awful, right? So, I don't know like wins wise, how you project that or what, but it was, and I don't want to say that there's a disconnect at all because that's not what the case was. It's just you have the front office that's excited to see, what they have in this roster, right? Getting no Cade, getting no J.I. We talked to Trajan about, J.I.'s role, him having the chance to show what he can do at point guard. But all the players, everybody's like, we don't even need to talk about last season because we know like how bad it was, right? So it's just the sense of like new, like a sense of newness, moving on, trying to turn the page on whatever this rebuild's been the last 4 years. A lot of sense of togetherness, like, guys still having pretty good vibes like they've had throughout this whole thing. I don't know what thread that is, but I hope this is all coming together into like one coherent thought, right? Like we're in like just kind of 1.5 stage of the rebuild where you have to see what happens, but at the same time, like they're not going to bottom out, or at least not intentionally bottom out the way that they have in the past.
So I want to ask this, and then we're going to get into what you talked about there, kind of the goal for the season.
Yeah.
And Detroit for Life, you ask about the vets. We're obviously going to get into that one also. But Justin Chisholm asks, Omari, how did you get the first question for every player? Special privileges, seniority, earned top dog status.
Seniority.
The people want to know, Omari. I mean, you kind of are the guy now.
Seniority. Yeah, I'm the longest senior beat writer. So longest senior beat writer traditionally gets the first question. And yeah, 5 years in, I've waited for this. I've waited for this. And I'm glad you guys noticed. That means a lot.
Listen, man, I am very proud of you, Omari. We don't talk about this stuff very often. We've known each other for a minute now. We've been doing this podcast for a while. So I do take pride in the fact that my friend, my co-host, is the man covering the Detroit Pistons right now. You are the senior doing that. So I
appreciate that.
I love that for you, and you deserve it. So let's get into the quotes. So the one I took down was from Trajan first. He said, I don't think the goal for us is wins and losses. We want to win as many games as possible, but it's about putting a group together that puts together a Detroit Pistons identity. So Omari, we go back to this kind of idea of Detroit Pistons identity. What do you take away from that quote as Trajan mentioned? Not necessarily about wins and losses still. It's about forming an identity and I feel like a foundation, as you kind of alluded to as well.
It's tough because, I feel like this is been said about the team for so long, the 5 years since I've been covering them. And obviously it's a new regime now, so you can't hold them to that standard. But I mean, it's what they've been trying to get to, right? Being a team that you're at home, we're going to defend home court. Teams don't want to come to Detroit because they know you're going to give a year off. They don't want to face you on the road either. You're competing every night. You're playing hard-nosed defense. You're playing with toughness and physicality. All of those buzzwords, right? But I think you just look at how Pistons have won in the past. It's always been on the defensive end. And I mean, we talk about, Ausar and all these other guys who, could take, even bigger steps forward on that end of the floor. And that's what JB talked about as well, was just the defensive end. So can they not be a bottom 10 defense? I think it's the main question for next season. Can you finally get out of, the basement when it comes to that and become a little bit more respectable? You have guys like Darren and Isaiah Stewart really holding down the paint. Ausar is not your only perimeter defender, like somebody like Cade or Ivy or somebody else has stepped up, maybe even Ron Holland. It's going to be just on defense. I think you can just outline this team's path on offense with Cade Cunningham and the shooting and whatnot, but they've got to make a leap on defense for this team to get anywhere. And when they talk about identity, that's what I think of first is defense.
And it was funny, Isaiah Stewart said, I know amongst our peers, amongst other teams, we're not respected based on last season. This season, we're coming in to demand and earn that respect. We're playing grit basketball and we're playing strong. At the end of the day, we're playing Detroit basketball. So another kind of reference to that. And so I always, I know people get excited when they hear that. I'm excited to see what that is, right? I mean, I think as you alluded to, Omari, it's probably on the defensive end and playing hard every night and being competitive. But I know for me, I want to see it play out on the court because I feel like we've been down this road before where we're going to bring in these type of players and we're going to play this brand of basketball. And then maybe that's not exactly what we saw with the product. But it was interesting to hear those, from Trajan, from Isaiah Stewart. And then JB said, I thought this was really interesting. He said on the set the foundation matters. This is what he learned from Cleveland. What you see in situations like this is young guys get to play and make mistakes, and they know they're going to keep playing, so they don't learn as quickly as they should. We're going to hold guys to a standard. I thought that was a staunch message to the young guys on the Pistons that, hey, we got vets here, and if you don't do things the way you need to do them, then maybe you're not going to get to just play like maybe that has played out in the past.
And that's really about depth, right? Just having
Yeah.
veterans in front of the young guys who are really going to make them earn that spot. I thought it was pretty interesting today. Ron Holland mentioned that Paul Reed was the player that stood out the most to him. When's the last time they truly had that type of competition at center where you have a guy, Paul Reed, who hustles, defends. Ron said he's even been knocking down some threes here and there. So that's just the depth aspect of it, right? Like you're not stuck at the end of the fourth quarter, with four guys under the age of 25 just because the rest of the roster is hurt or, whatever else it may be. And having guys like Tobias, Tim Hardaway, players who have been longtime starters, I think probably gives JB a safety valve that, I don't know if Monty really had or I don't know if Dwayne really had it either. Just players that have been in winning environments that can get it done in those moments. So they won't have to rely too hard, on certain guys if they're not playing well, or at least that's what they're saying right now. We see how it plays out in practice, but, so far JD's maintained that line that they're going to have to earn their minutes.
So Detroit for Life 1000 says, did you guys have any takeaways from some of the players alluding to the vets from last year not being bought in? Seems like Tobias, THJ, and Malik are much more involved with the young guys. I want to use this quote to kind of get into that, Omari. Ausar on the wing depth. The wing room, I learn from them every day. I work with Tobias, Fontecchio, sometimes Ron, Tim. They're great vets. Tobias will always say, AT, come shoot with me. That's something we didn't have last year. So, I don't want to sit here and crap on the vets that were here last year. That was a really hard season for everybody. But it did seem like, at least based on the quotes, right? And this is the honeymoon phase of the season. Everybody's, fully bought in and things are great. But it did seem like there was a lot of direct comments to these vets and kind of how they're approaching things and how excited some of the younger guys are about having them here.
Yeah, a few of the guys did mention that the veterans this year have just been like a different level of engaged from the ones last year. And I mean, last year just had so much change as well. I mean, you think about, Monte Morris never even taking the floor. And, obviously they ended up trading some guys at the deadline once things fell apart, obviously pretty early at that point. But this says a lot about Tobias, I think, who's come in and he's really been vocal about wanting to come and be that leader. He's talked about how he established his career here in Detroit 8 years ago. He's 23 years old, hadn't proven anything. And he really blossomed here, met his wife here, and he just felt like it was the right stage of his career to come back. So I think when you have somebody like that who doesn't necessarily have anything to prove individually, but can come in for the defined role and already some degree of respect in the locker room just because, him and Tim Hardaway Jr. are the two oldest guys on this team, right? That's just a whole different, which is crazy. Like I remember watching Tim Hardaway when I was in college, on that Michigan team, but those two guys are the veterans now. And at all signs, I mean, Marcus Sachs, the other guys have said it. They've been given tips not just about the court, but life in general. Tobias talked a bit about you got to manage your money. You got to make sure your off the court stuff is handled so that you're not distracted on the court. Like stuff like that you don't necessarily think of. And again, today was the first day of practice, and they've already had stories about how they've been able to bond with this guy. So I just think it says a lot about the approach that Tobias has had so far.
Yeah, I mean, Wes brings it up, the importance of vets who both help the young guys, but can also replace them when they're struggling. I think that's important. It's one thing to have a guy that will come in and, help a player off the court with their money or whatever. And I'll give the Sasser quote in just a second. But also, you're not playing well tonight. You didn't bring it tonight. Well, I'm going to come in and take your minutes, and I'm going to be good enough to do it. And I think, myself, I wasn't, with like the Joe Harris and some of those things, it was like, oh yeah, he can come in. He wasn't good enough to actually take minutes from anybody at that point in his career. And it seems like these guys are these vets. Yes, they're vets. They're older. They're towards the end of their careers, but they're still good enough that they can play significant time. So Sasser says, I thought this one was really interesting. Usually I'm like anti-media day. Omari, I told you this. You text me and we kind of talked about this episode. I'm like, Omari, I'm not going to have a whole lot to say. We originally had planned on having a guest on and they had their anniversary tonight. So shout out to them and hopefully they're having a great evening. And you were like, well, maybe we won't be able to get our opinions out. And I was like, I don't have an opinions. I'll just play host and it'll be fine. But I thought there was some interesting ones. And Sasser said, we had good vets last year, but I feel a different vibe from these vets. They seem more into it. Not even just on the court, they're helping us with life. Like that's not just a, as YouTube user says, that's not just a, hey, I'm in the best shape of my life quote. That's a pretty like direct and blunt quote of like, hey, last year these guys maybe weren't in it in the same way that these guys are this year.
Yeah, no, I would say that that's 100% true. And again, I think I look at this roster and, I'm excited. Well, I won't say excited, but, you talk about roles, right? And even just, beyond, what veterans can offer in the locker room and in life and whatnot. These guys are elite floor spacers, right? Like Tim Hardaway could heat up and knock down 6, 7 threes. Malik Beasley's so accurate from the corners. So, that's part of it too. Like, I'm curious to see how that actually looks in practice. We have multiple guys in multiple positions who could all give you, some of that spacing that you lacked, right? And you opened it up earlier, but this is our last pod. Not talking basketball. I know that's really what you want to do, Bryce. Like media day, all that, like all the words. You want to get to the nitty gritty and really talk about plays and hoops, which we're pretty close to. So it's fun.
I know, man. Like, I know I'm going to just go way overboard with exhibition games, but I was looking at my game notes from last year. I was getting like 2.5, 3 pages of game notes from the exhibition games last year. So I'm excited to be locked in. Just leave it with this one. Bickerstaff on the vets. They wanted to be here. That's important to mention. They wanted to be here and want to be a part of the process. They understand exactly what they're getting into. And because of that, they just want to give back. And I think that's important to mention also. These guys, a couple of them at least signed up to be on the Pistons. Harris obviously got a great payday. Yeah. Beasley, obviously Tim Hardaway Jr. was traded, but they knew what they were getting into. Let's transition a little bit to the players now. So I want to start with Ausar Thompson. We had a couple comments here that, Ausar not in camp is a real disappointment. When will he be back? Ben says, how worried should fans be that Ausar isn't going to live up to the hope and potential from where he was drafted? And so the quote from Trajan, he's going through a process with the NBA and Players Association to be clear to play. Excited to have him back, just waiting for a resolution. He's allowed to do conditioning, strength training, and non-contact drills. Omari, what insights can you give beyond that on where Ausar's at? And then just kind of, I guess, I know you don't get disappointed. You're not a fan of the team, but just kind of not having Ausar part of things right now and that where that has the team and him.
No, exactly. I mean, anytime you're dealing with any type of blood clot situation, there's always going to be, some degree of where it's just going to go, right? We have players who have recovered from it, and you have players who, didn't and ended their career early. And so far, I mean, all the signs we've gotten from Ausar, his recovery and everything is that it's going according to plan. Like as you mentioned, he's doing conditioning, not contact stuff. He just has to be cleared for 5-on-5. He and Trajan were both pretty clear. Like, it's just in their hands at this point. There's nothing that they can really do. So if there's anything that I guess adds to that stress, if you're in the front office or you're a fan or whatnot, it's just, certainty of it, right? Like, how long would it take for this process to play out? It's obviously a pretty rare situation, right? Like, it's not too often NBA players have blood clots to begin with. Yeah, let's just wait and see, honestly. I think it's tough, just given that they almost had everybody healthy for camp, right? And Ausar is just sitting back. Like, I mean, I'm ready. Like, I'm good to go. I just can't yet. He was excited talking about the work he put in with Fred Vinson and the work he put in with his brother, tightening his handle. It sounds as though he's ready to go. So it's just a wait and see process at this point. And I wish I had more to offer, but we just have to wait and see.
I mean, at least they're not the Memphis Grizzlies, who look like they did not get rid of the injury bug, as they already have 2 guys out, GG and
Vince Williams.
Vince Williams, and then I saw Jaren hamstring. Yeah, so they're already into it in Memphis. I think that was a lot of people's kind of sleeper pick this year in the Western Conference was, hey, this Memphis Grizzlies team is going to come back, and then they're already battling some injuries. One more quote on Ausar before we go to break, and this was Ausar on his defense. I thought this was interesting, so I want to get your thoughts. I'm still getting better at it defensively, learning the little things like schemes, how to get into somebody's body. I was going off of athleticism, and I think I've gotten better at actually playing defense and saving energy while still stopping the best player. That just stood out to me where he admitted, like, you know what? Last year, I was just going off my natural abilities. I didn't maybe necessarily know what I was doing. And to me, it's like, man, he could be as good as what a lot of us think because he wasn't like just fully bought into the scheme. Not that he wasn't trying, but it's a lot for a rookie. So as he learns schemes and the nuances and those things, he may be even better than what he saw as a rookie, where it was just a lot of natural athleticism.
Yeah, I mean, most players don't really know what they're doing on defense when they come in. Guys like Ausar and Derek Lively, like, that's rare. You're typically not an impactful defender for your first couple of years of your career, if that. And I actually asked Ausar that question just because I was curious. I mean, we always talk about what he doesn't do on offense, but what he was good at last year was defense, and that was his first season. So how do you improve from there? And I was just curious because I don't think we had ever really asked him about that. Like, he was so good at it so early on. Like, he's, checking Shea and whatnot, it's just like, oh, he's got it, right? But yeah, his response was interesting. He's like, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just an athlete, and now I actually have a better understanding of what opposing teams are trying to do. And it's like, okay, well, what does that look like? So I get like that's why it's tough that he's not like able to play right now, because this is a perfect time for him to really show what he could do at camp and carve out that role. And he may still have that. There's still 3 weeks or so till the season tips off. But no, I thought that was an interesting response because I mean, again, if he's already where he was last season and he gets better, and then you're talking about a guy who could be in the conversation for all defense, which would be huge for this team.
Yeah, and what's really important to note there is we're not talking about like some high school kid, right, that's more athletic or physically gifted than there. This is the NBA where everybody is super athletic, and he was doing it because he was athletic enough to do so. So he puts the mental side to it, and he's going to be really, really good. Let's go to a short break here, Omari. When we come back, we can do Tobias Harris, Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, Cade, wherever you want to go, you call it. We'll get into some of those quotes. And if you were watching live with us right now, first, thank you. But get some questions in. We'll have some time at the end of the pod to dive into those, but we'll come back with some more quotes right after this.
All right, we are back with segment 2, and let's go ahead and dive into Jaden Ivey because I know he's going to be one of the most discussed players during camp. So I asked Trajan about J.I. and just sort of how he viewed his role going into the season as far as there not being another point guard on the roster. And he didn't really address that aspect of the question, but he did say he's been an incredible bright spot for us as far as his dedication and willingness to work. He's been our guy that's been, whether it's the most diligent or most disciplined, he's been really excited and the one we've had to pull back as far as overworking. So this has kind of followed, Jaden Ivey from day one where, even as a rookie, we talked to Dwayne Casey about, how, J.I. would always be the last one on the court, first one to show up. I remember we were in Orlando and, they had to leave the court because some other team was coming in or something like that. They were like past their allotted time. And J.I. just kept shooting. Like he just kept going, like wanted to get a few extra shots in. So that's who he is. I don't think his work ethic has ever really been questioned. It's, you have this role coming into the season. There's no other player on the roster who can really threaten you as the quote-unquote backup point guard, whether you start or come off the bench, you have the ball and Cade doesn't. So what does that look like in practice? And JB has some nice things to say about Ivey as well. So it seems like they're really excited about the work he's put in and what he can bring to the team.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that, don't say this stuff about every player. Again, I realize it's all sunshine and rainbows right now, but just talking about having to pull him back as far as overworking and all that, I think it really highlights J.I.'s work ethic, and I think sometimes when a player doesn't improve the way a fan base wants to or the way we want to, then you kind of you automatically question that. And I don't even know that you mean to. It's just like, why doesn't he shoot it better? Oh, he must not be working on it. When like it may be mental, or maybe he's struggling to adjust to the speed. Or as J.I. brought up himself, I thought this was very insightful. He's playing for his third coach in 3 seasons, Omari. He came in with Dwayne, then he got Monty, and then now he's going to get JB. And he says, it's not easy at all. Anybody can attest to that. Having 3 different coaches in different systems every year, it's not easy. But that's what makes you a pro, is being able to adjust to whatever system it is. I hadn't thought about that, but that is not easy to just go from new system to new system to new system while you're just trying to figure out the NBA in general. So that wasn't something that I had thought about, but I thought was interesting when I saw that quote from J.I.
Yeah, he was pretty frank about how difficult it is. And I mean, yeah, you're coming into the league and you're learning your third system in 3 years. And your role shifted a lot within those 2 years you've already played too, where you start off playing with Cade, then Cade gets hurt, and now everything's running through you, trial by fire. Then you come back and you're playing mostly off ball, for the first half of the year. Then you're moving back on ball. And it's just, and last season's already like, completely ruined by the time you get in. There's not the structure you want to see. So it's been a pretty chaotic first 2 years for him and for Jalen Duren. That's why this season is so intriguing for me, because Ivey has just not had a regular environment for like a full calendar year. Like there's always been something that, added some extra adversity to a situation, whether, it's Cade getting hurt or whatever else it may be. So we'll see what that looks like. I think he's the player I'm probably most excited to watch, just given that we know what he can do and it's just applying it in a consistent manner.
So Caleb says, nice to finally catch another live. It's been a while. Hope you gentlemen are doing well. We are, Caleb. Thank you.
Appreciate
and thank you for joining us and glad you were able to make this one. You talked about JD. Let's go to him. I believe this was from JB on JD's ability to handle the ball and make plays. Is that something we can unlock with him to open up his game a bit and get more involved so that everything isn't a grind? So I think, my takeaway from that is we saw this a little bit last year with Monty putting the ball in JD's hands, especially at the top of the key, letting him do DHOs and those type of things. We've talked a little bit about who else handles the ball outside of Cade and JI. Sounds like Omari. Maybe JD is going to be able to look at those options and see how he's capable of handling those situations again this season.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see if he's pushing the ball in fast breaks and letting them make those types of reads, or if it's more so DHO, simple play, or if he's going to be playmaking out of the short road. There's all sorts of things you could theoretically do with Duren. And one thing we don't talk about as much like we do, but it's been more so on defense, is that he has improved at a fairly consistent pace on offense, where he goes from shooting 61% of the line to 79%. His assists went up a decent amount last season compared to when he was a rookie. Obviously, the rebounding and everything else. And we've seen flashes of just the coordination he has with the ball as well. So, I'm not saying he could become Giannis or anything, but I do wonder to what extent can you leverage some of these natural gifts that he's shown on offense, right? Because, a 6'11" guy who can see the floor the way he can, if he could extend his range at arm, if you could shoot 79% of the line, I assume you could probably knock down some mid-range jumpers as well. I'm curious to see if this could be a leap forward offensively for Duren in a way that we haven't seen. Because just going off of JB's comments, it seems like they're really thinking outside the box as far as how they could utilize him in some of these sets.
Yeah, and it makes sense that they would be looking for another guy. We've talked about these vets, but none of those guys are really big assist guys or usage guys. They have low turnovers because of that. So you can look at this roster and go, okay, who else is going to create? And for some people, it may be Ausar. For some people, it may be Sasser. And for others, it may be Jalen Duren. The other one with JD was talked about what he prioritized this offseason. This is directly from JD. He said, all parts of my game, me for one, trying to be in the best shape possible. I'm taking care of my body first and foremost. This kind of goes to YouTube users. Everybody's in the best shape of their life. But he said, whether that's becoming more flexible, stronger, faster, taking care of my body. That was good to hear. I do think that's something important for JD, is just being in better shape, whether that's playing more minutes in general, helping, his effectiveness on the defensive end. Let's talk about Cade Cunningham. I thought this one was a little insightful from Cade. Well, he had a few, but he talked about having a healthy offseason, Omari. He said it felt good this offseason starting out, being able to not deal with rehab and all of that. Still felt good, still felt in rhythm from the season. Building on that was the main priority, adding onto it and being sharp for this year. I hadn't thought about him coming off seasons where he was having to rehab and just get himself back into the groove. Maybe we do see that jump that we're all really interested to see if he's able to make this season.
Yeah, that was another question from me, just about how his offseason approach was altered, by the fact that there wasn't some sort of reset period, whether it was because of shins bothering him and he's got to wait for the information to go down, or, obviously he was rehabbing coming back into last season. So just to, finish last season strong, his last 48 games or so, his numbers were, just about as good as anybody's, pretty efficient across the board. And then you carry that momentum into an offseason where, you prioritize conditioning, and he can really sort of hone in on the areas where he struggled so far. Because I would say conditioning's probably been one of the bigger issues, whether it's him just wearing down at the end of games or, a shot becoming flat, whatever it may be. I think that aspect's been pretty noticeable. So that makes him an interesting player to watch too. Obviously he's Cade, but it's just the motor aspect of it, right? If you're getting first half Cade, for an entire game, then that probably alters things pretty significantly, because Cade's an interesting fourth quarter player. Seems like he makes everything, or he just can't get anything to fall right. And, the nights where maybe he has some pain or is dealing with something, in hindsight, it's a little bit more obvious when those shots were falling short in the fourth quarter.
He talked about that as well, with the shin issue affecting his conditioning in the past. And he said it was hard for me to get a good amount of load running because it would flare up my bones. This summer, I didn't have that. So it was nice to be able to work and push myself further than I have since high school. Maybe that's a big part of it. We talked about the shin affecting his percentages from the three-point line, and maybe he wasn't getting the lift on the jumper like he should be. Maybe we haven't seen a completely 100% Cade Cunningham. Maybe we've seen a lot lower percentage than what we realized, just in terms of preparation for the season, conditioning for the season. And you bring up a good point. What kind of fourth quarters are we going to see from him if he is in better shape and better equipped to handle the load? Whether it's a little extra, last year we all looked at his body, like, oh, he's stronger. Well, if he's carrying more weight and he's not in the best shape that he could be, maybe his conditioning just wasn't where it needed to be. And hopefully we see that and we can see the best version of himself this year. And then he talked about improving at the rim, Omari. I worked on my floater, and that's going to help me out a lot as far as not always having to jump into bigger guys or shoot as many contested layups. So your thoughts on Cade maybe going more to the floater, a little bit more mid-range than he does getting all the way to the rim and having to take those bodies at the rim.
I'm curious to see how he applies that, because I would say part of the reason why he's had to develop that floater. I mean, you should always develop a floater anyway. It's not like he was forced to do it or anything. That's the natural part of growth. But he doesn't always get the calls at the rim, right? Like he'll go in, he'll draw contact, and he's been allowed to be defended pretty physically, I think, so far. You look at how much he drives, and, I think his free throws went up a little bit last season. But, just to have that in your arsenal, just another way to keep the defense honest. And if your at rim percentage is going up, you have that floater, you're finding other ways to score. Maybe you do eventually get those star calls at some point, right? Like, I don't think he's ever going to be like a James Harden or Jimmy Butler, but there's probably a bit more he could have gotten within the last 2 years. Yeah, I'm curious to see how he applies that floater in game and how much of a weapon it becomes for him pretty early into the year.
One more Cade quote. He said, excited to have vets who can shoot, and that we, quote, needed guys like that after last year. As Wes says, that's extremely interesting, or especially interesting, given that Cade is usually pretty understated and doesn't always say things as blunt as that. I thought that was pretty telling. Like, multiple comments about the vets shooting and floor spacing, and directly there from Cade Cunningham, Omari, saying that was something we did not have last season.
No, it absolutely was not. We look at Cade. Let's go to Simone Fontecchio. He's coming into an interesting situation where he arrived at the trade deadline, played 16 games, and really impressed. But you have a complete front office and coaching change over the offseason, and he still comes back. He's still grateful. One thing he said that I thought stood out, he said the Pistons, referring to when he was traded from Utah, they showed me how much they wanted me. When they traded for me, I don't take it for granted. I will always be grateful for the Pistons for making that decision. So that's like a bright spot from last season, right? Like, they went through all this stuff, but they still managed to land a guy, Simone Fontecchio, who's exactly what they need at the three. And on top of that, he's like, I'm grateful I got traded here. Like, this team lost 28 straight games. And he's like, thank you for trading for me. Thank you for giving me that opportunity. And I'm curious what he looks like in a full season, because you look at how the roster's set up, and especially with Ausar, with the situation he's dealing with now. Like, can you go ahead and slot Simone Fontecchio in at the three? And what does that look like for a full season when you've got spacing at the 3 and 4? And it's just a different level of spacing that Cade's had in the past.
Yeah, so real quick, back to Cade. So Wes said in the month of November, so essentially to start the season, Cade was 22.7, 3.9, 6.9, 4.3 turnovers on 42, 33, 89.
He led the league in turnovers for like that first month, I think.
For the full season, 22.7, so same points, but 4.3 rebounds, up a little bit, 7.5, up half an assist, down to 3.4 turners, so almost a whole turnover, and then 45, 36, 87. So as Wes mentions here, much more efficient and one less turnover. So it'll be interesting to see if Cade is able to come out this year with this offseason, and it's not just, hey, he talked about it, but it actually shows on the court. Yeah, listen, I hate that I always say this, Omari. I think Troy Weaver's maybe best move was the last one he got to make, which was trading for Simone Fontecchio. And it's the one that finally made sense in terms of what you want to acquire and bring to the team. But yeah, I mean, I'm big on Fontecchio. I thought he was going to get more money than what he got. I think we talked about it. I think we all three would have paid him much more than what he got if it would have taken that. The only downside of that contract is the years and him not, being locked in for longer. But it is nice to hear somebody talk about wanting to be in Detroit and part of the organization and the chance he got. I was surprised. And again, you may not have any other insight into this, but he did have surgery this offseason in May, but it sounds like he's right back into it, right? No restrictions on Fontecchio right now?
No, yeah, he had that surgery in May. And, he's talked about he's been, playing 5-on-5,
Okay.
no pain. It sounds like he's completely good to go.
Perfect. All right. Where do you want to go? We got 5 or so minutes. We got Sasser. We got Holland, quote or two. We got Isaiah Stewart.
Yeah, let's talk
Tobias
about
Harris.
Isaiah Stewart really
Okay.
quickly, just because he was asked about, power forward and center. And it sounds like he's preparing to play, predominantly center this time around, which he seemed pretty happy about. He kind of smiled when he said it. His quote was, "JB loves my physicality and me playing strong down low, my offensive rebounding. I spent a lot of time this offseason at the 5, and I'm looking forward to it." Like, just depth-wise, we kind of assumed that he'd be more of a 5 this season anyway, right? But for him to come out and confirm that aspect of it, I think files that away and also allows us to contrast what you're getting from him at the 5 compared to like a JD or a Paul Reed. But I'm intrigued by him as a floor spacer at the 5, and how JB tries to utilize that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we've gotten a little bit of insight. We did our all lineups episode. If you guys haven't listened to that, as the Pistons fan base starts to come back, as the season starts to get close, a lot of those episodes you can go back and listen to and catch up on. They're going to stand for a while. We talked about J.I. starting and Fontecchio and Harris and Jalen Duren. I feel like the information we got from Media Day kind of lends itself to that, Omari, right? Like, I find it hard to believe Ausar's going to start whenever he's not even doing full team stuff right now. And then if Isaiah is talking about playing at the 5 this much, I can't imagine. I don't think there's much likelihood he starts over Jalen Duren. So I do think we're getting a little bit of insight into what JB may thinking in terms of a starting lineup. And I just love Stu going back to the 5. I was a fan of them trying him out at the 4. I was fine with them seeing if it worked. I don't think it does. I don't think it's going to. But that doesn't mean he can't be a very, very competent backup 5 man in this league.
And we've always said, like, Stu is the ideal modern small ball 5. There's a lot of debate on if it was even worth having him learn how to shoot. We've been pretty steady. Like, yes, even if he doesn't become a full-time 4, you like having a small ball 5 who can shoot and also defend is still enormously useful. And it'll be a little bit easier for him taking centers off the dribble than other power forwards, but a lot of those guys move like guards, right? So just matchup-wise, it can still lead to him, being better in some aspects of last year just because the matchups are different. So, I mean, I think this is the perfect role for him. He's given something unique that they're not getting at the position from Duren, and he seems pretty happy about it. So we'll see what it looks like.
All right, I want to go to 2 quotes before we go to break, and they have more to do with just kind of the general NBA life. So the first one's from Sasser, and you asked Sasser about his late season slump after a hot start. He said, "I don't want to say rookie wall. That's an excuse. But it is a difference coming from college, going from 32 to 82 games. I went into the summer pushing my body almost to the limit." I thought that was very good insight into the life of a rookie in the NBA, Omari, where we just say rookie wall, but I don't think we always think about it's like a real thing. Like, I appreciate Sasser going, "I don't want to make an excuse," but that is a major difference. The length of the season, the physicality, the athleticism, all of that stuff. And so I thought it was, him being real there. Like, hey, I went from playing 30 some games to now I'm playing 82, and the wear and tear and kind of how hard it is to get through that season and having to learn from it.
Yeah, I mean, he hit a hard wall last season. I have his stats up here now. Through his first 47 games, so that's 2/3 of his season, he shot 48.4% overall and 43.1% from 3, about 3 assists for every turnover. I mean, he was pretty solid, those first 2/3 of the season, and shot the ball especially well. And then you compare that to every 70 games he played after that. But like, it's just such a stark difference that just looking at it, I thought like that has to be like a Ricky Wall situation, unless he was like injured or something, because it didn't make sense. But here it is. His last 24 games, that dropped to 35.6% overall and 30.9% from 3. So you're talking just opposite ends of the spectrum. And I thought that was pretty insightful, right? Because you talk about the Ricky Wall a lot, as you said, but to actually see it happen like that, and, for him to come out and say, "I pushed my body to the max this season," it says a lot. But also, he shot the ball really well to start last season. And if he could shoot like that this year, then maybe there is some type of role for him, especially if he takes care of the ball as well.
All right, so the last one here. Ron Holland says he's way more comfortable compared to draft night. "Walking into this press conference, I was nervous to talk to y'all the first time, and now I'm excited." That should say a lot. I appreciate the vulnerability. Like, these guys, it's easy to hide behind you. You have all these cameras on you, all these mics, and him being real enough to say, like, "Listen, this was nerve-wracking." And this is a guy that's been in the limelight. He was a top high school recruit. He was playing with the Ignite last year. And then he still's going like, this was a lot for me. I think it gave insight into what life is like for these guys that goes beyond just being players, right? Like all of the other things they have to deal with, and that maybe some of these guys, it's a little bit of an adjustment.
And along with that, it also gives a little bit of insight into the player-athlete relationship where, you know, you first come in and we're just all like named as faces, right? Like, you don't know what to expect. But we talked to him about Summer League. You know, we saw him like maybe a month ago or so, and now he knows us, he recognizes us, and there's more of a rapport there. So it reflects that. And also just him being a rookie, right? You know, he's never dealt with this. He's with all the, you know, the adults now. And he's the kid on the team almost, you know, like I don't want to, you know, like, I don't say that insultingly, but he's like 19. Like he's just turned 19. And, you know, now you have guys like Cade who are like 22, 23. And, you know, it's a little bit of a difference there. So you just see him becoming more comfortable. You see guys kind of taking him in. And there's certainly been, I guess, some growth from him as far as getting comfortable since he got drafted.
Yeah. I thought those were interesting just because they're looking at what life is like in the NBA. So let's go to a short break, Omari. We got a handful of questions. If you guys have any others, go ahead and send them our way. We got one from Twitter. We'll get into all of that when we get back from this.
All right, we are back with our final segment. We've got a little bit under 20 minutes, so we're just going to dive into some questions right here, Bryce.
Yes, let's just go right into them.
Yeah. All right, cool. We're going to open a question this was actually from Twitter, but our guy, Anthony Bellino. We'd love to have a number, a goal, a target. What would be the number of wins you'd be comfortable with for the Pistons this year? I'll hang up and listen. I don't want to set any expectations at all. I'm going to let you tackle this one first, Bryce, because I don't want anybody saying, well, Omari said before the season. Omari didn't say anything. Omari's not putting any expected wins out there. We're just going to wait and see, all right? So I'm going to let Bryce jump on this bomb for me.
All right, so if you heard some background noise, I was trying to check who this Facebook comment from. If it's from the Hunter Davis, I think it is. This is one of my former players, and he was a hooper. He was really good, played in college. He was talk about really hard worker. So if it's the Hunter Davis, I'm thinking it is. Shout out, Hunter. I hope you're doing well. And that's why you could hear us in the background, I think, from my phone, because I was trying to check who the comment was. Yeah, shout out AB, Anthony, good friend as well, doing a lot of really good stuff with Detroit sports. Comfortable with is such a funny comment. Like there's a number that you're no longer comfortable with. To me, it's like a range of, okay, they can win this many, and then we don't want them to win in this range. But if they go over that range, it's okay, because then that means they're like actually good.
Yeah. It's like how many wins would it take for you to not have to put a bag over your head as a fan? Like that's kind of how I read it, like comfortable.
So you have to get to 25, right? To not be just severely disappointed. But then it's like 30 to 40 would be a letdown, because like maybe now you make the play-in game and convey that pick to Minnesota, which is crazy that pick is now in Minnesota. Or, okay, but if we win over 40, that means they were really good and these young guys really exploded. So I'm just going to continue to live in the 25 to 30 range. Like that is my answer, is 25 to 30, where I would love to see this thing end up.
I think they win more than 14. Right.
I love it.
All right, let's see. We have a question here from Ben Chulik. Scale 1 to 10, how worried should fans be that Ausar isn't going to live up to hope and potential from where he was drafted? I mean, I don't think you should be worried at all. I mean, you know, until it gets to the point to where maybe, you know, something more serious. I wouldn't worry at all. I mean, you know, we'll see how this process plays out. But like last season, he was exactly as advertised. I mean, you know, I don't think I saw anything last season that, you know, sways, you know, what my opinion of him going into the draft, where obviously he's a super high upside guy if a couple other aspects of his game click. So, I mean, I don't think fans should worry at all. I mean, you know, like he's going into year 2. We'll see what happens with, you know, the health situation. But beyond that, it seems like he's pretty much on pace from a developmental standpoint.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. If you want to be worried about something, it's the health, right? And I have no idea, like no insight into how much you should or should not be. But if there's anything, it's that, right? I mean, there may be things that happen this year that then can cause us to worry if the jumper regresses, or the ball handling doesn't get any better or something like that, or the defense doesn't continue to grow like we talked about earlier. But going into the season, I do not have those concerns. I think right now, on a scale of 1 to 10, it would be very low unless you had major concerns about the health. So we're in lockstep there. Colin Wood, Tobias, somebody we haven't talked a lot about, has been giving great quotes the past 2 days, really embracing the leadership role. I think, did you have a video with Tobias from practice today, or one of the players talking about Tobias?
I had a video of Tobias today, kind of joking about a talk he had with Ron Holland, where I guess one of their first conversations was a debate about the best fast food restaurants. Great debate for the pod, by the way. Maybe we can have more.
Yeah, no, we're going to get into it. So go ahead and talk about Tobias, and then we'll get into the rest of this.
Yeah, but he was saying that Ron told him that he doesn't like salad, and Tobias is just like, all right, like, we're going to get you to like salad, and that just kind of goes into taking care of your body and all that. So, again, just the rapport you see building between these guys, and, Tobias, whether it's telling Ron Holland to eat a salad or motioning over to AT after practice, like, hey, come shoot with me. It's just stuff like that I think guys have noticed and appreciated about him.
So Harry says, what ingredients could you put in a salad to get Ron Holland down with it? How do you eat your salads, Omari? Do you eat salad?
Not when I'm at home, but like sometimes when I'm out, I'll get one. But I'm not like a huge like salad guy, to be honest. It's good, but hey.
By the way, I have a mac and cheese take here in a second. But go ahead. So
go ahead and give us the mac and cheese take.
No.
I'm distracted now.
No, let's stay with the salad. We'll come back to that's called a tease. Right? I haven't been in this business long. I'm not very good at it, but we got to tease stuff. We got to keep the listeners here.
I want to hear enough.
I know. Well, they got to stay. I feel like sometimes they probably leave at the end of the podcast because we go off the rails. So you're not a huge salad person.
Yeah, I just never think to make them, but I do like salad. And you put like some grilled chicken in the salad or like grilled salmon or something, like now you're talking about like a really great meal. So I am a salad guy.
I'm a big salad person. I like salad.
Cool. I think if you put a steak, if it was like a steak salad, I feel like Ron Holland would probably eat it with like some sort of vinaigrette or something. That's just a guess. I have no clue, but
I would be out. Like, I don't want my steak in the salad. I would be so disappointed if I got my steak put in the salad.
So it's got to be steak and salad, but not steak in the salad.
Correct. I can do chicken. So Wes brings up chicken. He said he needs the protein. He can't just do the greens. Yeah, I'm okay with that. You will not waste like a steak by putting it in my salad. That would be very frustrating.
That's fair, because then it makes the lettuce all hot. Like, I don't know if I want that. So
YouTube user says, I eat salad, probably a little different than most. I like a little lettuce with my ranch. That's me as well, YouTube user, along with my coffee. I have a little bit of coffee with my coffee creamer every single morning. Life 101, homemade dressing served alongside. You're a real one if you're making homemade dressing. Okay.
You can make a pretty easy vinaigrette with like honey, lemon, and
that you just named like 4 ingredients. It already got not easy.
That's pretty easy. Like a 4-ingredient thing, like olive oil, lemon, and like a little bit of honey. Like you just mix it together, put it in a container, shake it. Really easy vinaigrette.
I don't think 2 of those things exist in my house. Christian says steak bowl from Chipotle is the closest thing to steak salad I'd eat. Steak salad, kind of crazy, not going to lie. Okay. So we do team meal. Hold on. Wes, did you have something here? You make your homemade mayo? You guys are crazy.
Yeah. If you have like an immersion blender, you can it's just oil and egg pretty much. Like it's really not that much. I haven't done it, but I've seen people do it.
Now I have to have a homemade blender. Like
immersion blender, not a homemade blender.
Oh, no, I just meant a blender. Okay. So we do team meals on Thursday nights. We play Friday night games as most states, and we do a team meal on Thursday. And the moms and dads make food for the team and all of that. This last Thursday, homemade mac and cheese. And Omari, it was so good. It was so good.
Walk us through the mac and cheese. Walk us through each layer of it.
No. You're making it too complex. It was just really good. And I definitely went back for seconds.
I'm trying to visualize it though.
And I don't know. And I told the lady, I said, ma'am, I'm kind of known as the not homemade mac and cheese guy. And you completely flipped it on me.
What's her name?
I have to talk about this on the pod. Mrs. Mendenhall. I don't know her first name. Mrs. Mendenhall.
Shout out to Mrs. Mendenhall for giving Bryce this life experience.
And listen, I love my wife.
Where is this going to go?
No, yeah, not in a good place. You know it's not good. I don't have to start it with that. And I really hope she can't hear me right now. I know she doesn't listen this far into the pod. They listened for about 5 minutes on the drive to school. But she's kind of messed up the box mac and cheese recently. And so like it made it hit even better. See how I'm whispering right now, trying to make sure she can't hear me. Hopefully the kids are like screaming right now. So
I'm not gonna test that one. I'm gonna let you get in trouble for that one.
it's our anniversary Saturday, so hopefully she gets over it by then. So
All right. Well, shout out
um
to the upcoming anniversary.
yeah, appreciate it. So yeah, there's our little break for food takes. Let's get back into basketball. Eric McKee says Jaden Ivey is a bust, or is this his breakout year with the coach that wants him here? I think we touched on this a little bit, Omari, just in terms of like 3 coaches, 3 years. He's gone through some ups and downs. I think this could be the year we see him finally figure things out. I know I'm in that boat. Like that's one thing I'm kind of being bullish on right now. Colin Wood says, "Oh, thank you. Happy anniversary from Life the 101. Thank you." Colin Wood says, Ivy backup point guard or starting next to Cade to start the season. Omari, I think we're still in the same place where we think he's going to start with Cade and then stagger into the second unit.
I would just start. Like if you're not starting him, then it's just tough to see how he has like an appropriate minutes load if you're trying to develop him. So I'm gonna stick with that for now. That Ivy starts.
All right. Caleb says, curious, Omari, what kind of access do press get during camp in terms of practices? This is interesting because I will be honest, until we started getting to know each other and working together, I assumed you sat there for the whole practice, got to watch everything, crazy access, all of that. But I've come to know that's not always the case. So what's kind of your access right now as training camp gets going?
Yeah, so they're doing 2-a-days right now. We get availability after the first practice, and we get like the tail end of it. So most of it's private, but we're let in once they sort of break from like the formal practice and do like individual stuff. So you have some guys over here taking shots, you have some guys over there taking shots, you got some guys in the back getting a lift or, a jog in, whatever it may be. But it's a bit more casual, but you still see what guys are working on, right? You're just not in the actual practice, watching the drills and everything else. And, teams are usually pretty, I don't want to say secretive, but like sometimes we'll go in the media room and they'll have like the curtain down so we can't see what's happening on the court and whatnot. So there's definitely some separation, but we get to see them towards the end once it's a bit more casual.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting the first time I got to experience it with you, just kind of coming in towards the end and then, kind of how it works, getting to go to different players and stuff like that. So last one here, and then I actually want to ask you about the big trade that happened Friday night. Derek Brown says, question for Bryce, how do you have the time to be a father of 3, husband, teacher, 2 different podcasts, and a football coach? That's crazy. It is a lot. This is where I get back in my wife's good graces. So I'll say this part a little bit louder. She holds everything down, like while we're doing this on a Tuesday night, she's getting the kids showered, ready for bed, fed, all of those things. And I get to sit in Royce's room, our youngest son, and, talk basketball with you, Omari, and Wes. And so that's truly a huge part of it. She allows me to live out childhood dreams. And then I'm super organized. I would say that's my biggest thing. So anybody who's looking for advice, not that maybe you want it, but I'm very organized, very structured. I take a lot of notes, and that makes things a whole lot easier.
He's also a machine, and I don't think he sleeps more than 3 hours a night.
That's not true. I am old, Omari, and when you get old, you have to sleep or you get headaches, and so it sucks. It sucks getting old. So all right, Knicks Timberwolves. So I said this also. Listen, I have like a 4-hour window in a week where I can't have my phone. And that's Friday nights during football games. That's the only time like I can't like get on Twitter or whatever. Like I'm completely away from the rest of existence and I'm just locked into football. And of course that trade went down on Friday night during the football game. And I like opened my phone to 50 notifications of different kinds. What was your initial reaction on the Karl Anthony Towns, Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo that had a little bit of Pistons flair in this as the pick got moved again to Minnesota? What were your initial thoughts? I saw some of your initial thoughts, I guess, but where are you at now?
Yeah. One, it's just always funny that the NBA, it seems like every year there's just some massive trade that takes place like a week or two before camp. And it's like, so I just sat on this trade until everybody was back. Although I know the Knicks, have been trying to go after Cat for a while, and they just finally had to put up a buff for it to happen. But when it first happened, I didn't like it at all, simply because Minnesota
it was nasty.
I think
nasty.
Your term. I did say nasty.
The trade was nasty. Wes reminds me.
I did say nasty, and it wasn't a good nasty. It was just like a nasty, like hold your nose nasty. And the reason for that is just because they gave up the best player in the deal, who was Cat. And you look at the return. Like I like Julius Randle as a player. Like I really do. I think he's still a little bit underrated, especially with the way the salary is going up now. And you just look at what he's giving you. He's a really great player. I don't think this is going to make Minnesota go from like a contender. It's like a fake contender or anything. They're still going to be really good. But he just hasn't shot the ball that well. And that's what you wonder is him and Gobert together. Can you win games going from, probably the best shooting big man in the league to, a guy who shot 31% last season? And he'll make up for some of that just with his playmaking. I think he could really be an engine for them in some ways. You could probably, get away with late lineups where, your backcourt is DiVincenzo and Anthony Edwards if you feel pretty good about Randall initiating things. Obviously, that Mike Conley too, so that gives you some flexibility. Financially, it gives them flexibility. Now you can extend Naz Reid, pretty easily. And I know that was part of it too, and Naz Reid deserves a bigger role. So I wouldn't say it's nasty. Like, I understand why they did it. It's still the bottom line for me is that I think the Knicks got the better end of the deal. And the only way Minnesota can really salvage it from their end is if that Pistons pick that is one of the first transactions I ever covered as a beat writer, and this pick still has not conveyed. It is, I think this is the fifth team. It went from the Pistons to the Rockets to OKC to New York and now to Minnesota. So, like, this pick just refuses to go away. Maybe you could turn that into an asset. Like, I don't know. But it's not nasty. Like, I think if you're dead set on trading for Karl Anthony Towns, then or you're dead set on trading Karl Anthony Towns, then that's probably the best haul you can get. DiVincenzo's a killer. The pick's great. Randall's a good player. It's just, is trading Cat the right decision? And that's where I'm still like, I don't know. But if you are dead set on trading Cat, I think that's the best deal you could have gotten. And that's why I feel a little bit better about it now.
Yeah, that's very true. I never would have guessed that they were going to get that return for Cat. And so that was really, really interesting. I still wonder if it's just a money play. My takeaway, quick thoughts was, I don't think it moved the needle for me for the Knicks, actually, a whole lot. I don't necessarily hate it, but I just think they traded in a lot of assets and some financial flexibility to, I get, there's a chance it really hits, right? Like, offensively, what Cat provides can really, really hit, and maybe they have the defensive infrastructure to make up for him and Brunson. I thought for the Timberwolves, I don't know, it definitely doesn't spring them forward. I don't think they're better. Some people do have that opinion. I do think it gives them a lot of flexibility, which isn't a bad thing, right? The pick and the money and all of that. And so it was just a crazy trade that happened on the Friday before training camp and media day, and all the players have to act like they don't know that the trade is going to be official, which is always kind of funny as well. I love that. So, finish some things off here. YouTube user Bryce's daughter likes Omari. She doesn't like the host of the other pod, who shall remain unnamed. This is actually true. My daughter does like Omari. My whole family does. My daughter hates Sam Vecini because our podcast lasts too long. And she'll go, "Dad, what are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm going to go record a podcast." "With who?" And when I say Sam, she gives the biggest eye roll that a 8-year-old girl could possibly give. And yeah, they are mortal enemies. Pistons Talk says, I think they trade Rudy next, in his opinion. Yeah, maybe there is a hard reset there. Henry Wu, one last one. Thoughts on Lamar Stevens making the team with Ausar health being a question? I think with Lamar, he's got a real chance, right? He's got to earn a spot, but there is that 15th roster spot, right?
There's that, and they also have a two-way spot available. So, I don't know if they prioritize keeping that two-way open. I'm sorry, that roster spot open, you probably saw them to a two-way. But, I mean, he's a guy who's, been productive in the past. I think the lack of shooting has probably been the biggest thing. Again, I think with Ausar itself being a question mark, it's just tough to speculate on, what it means for the roster moving forward. But if they do want to keep Lamar Stevens in, a non-just Motor City Cruise role, then they do have that third two that they can sign him to and still preserve that roster spot.
All right, guys. This is our last episode before we get some real basketball. I realize it's an exhibition game, but Sunday we get Detroit Pistons basketball. It returns. We'll be back Monday or Tuesday. We'll at least be able to talk about that a little bit, continue to look forward to the season, and then opening night will be here before we know it. Go Tigers. Again, I don't follow baseball enough to have any clue what they need to do moving forward. Just keep winning games. Whoever pitched today, hopefully he gets to pitch again soon, because apparently he's amazing. Go Lions, playing well. And Detroit sports, this exciting time, Omari.
Yeah, and one last note from Media Day. A couple players talked about wanting to mimic what the Tigers and Lions have done.
Yes.
They're not named after a kitty, so I don't know how that's going to impact it. But yeah, we're not basketball next week, and that's exciting. So I'll go ahead and close this out. Big thanks to our audio producer Robin Chan, our editor-in-chief Nicole Avery Nichols, and big thanks to Wes as always. And we will talk basketball with you all next week.